type of cycle that we tend to see in digital technology and have seen since the very beginning is a two-part cycle. First, you get a generation which creates new possibilities, new technologies, new ways of reaching people. And then you get a secondary wave of technology which makes that easier and more accessible.
This is Velocitize Talks, and I'm Eric Jones. I'm here with John Pryor, who's the Solutions Director at Twentysix. John, good to have you.
Hi, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Twentysix and your unique value proposition in the marketplace.
So I think this is a kind of question that might actually vary a bit depending on who you ask. We've got really strong offerings in UX, SEO, technology, creative, content, performance and affiliate marketing. But I think from my perspective, what we really do well, and that's fairly unique to us, is bring it all together. We've won over the last couple of years major Best Integrated Agency awards from Prolific London, UK Search Awards. I think that's testament to the way that our teams really work together and consider each other's requirements through every stage of the project, no matter which services we're actually offering to a client. It's always done with that realization from each team that the work they're doing is connected to the work every other team is doing, whether that's us, whether that's on the client side. So there's a holistic approach there that I think works really well for our clients.
So congrats on all the awards. Clearly this concept of integrated marketing has helped you bring brands to life online. What do you think has been the key ingredient of your success in doing that?
Well, the concept of life online is something that's really changed over the course of the time that we've been using that as a proposition. When we first started using it, it was against the backdrop of being connected on request. So we were dealing with clients who were looking at how they could replicate their print advertising online or put a phone number so somebody could contact them the way they knew how to deal with. And as the general digital proposition for the world has shifted through to that always on connection, first always on so long as you're at your desktop, through to always on no matter where you are, and that kind of environment where you're dealing with a third people looking at their phone within 5 minutes of waking up, 90% of people checking their phone throughout their workday. That really means that there's no or very little separation anymore between what's happening in the digital space and what's happening in physical space, what's happening in mail space. If you're treating all of those as separate concepts and separate channels, then you're not delivering a joined up experience.
What do you think is the hottest area in digital today, or maybe put it another way, what's the biggest thing that you see popping up on the RFPs that you get?
These trends creep up over time, and the thing that's really disappeared from RFPs is websites as a standalone concept. We used to, you get an RFP and it would say, we want a website. Here's maybe some information about our users that we gathered. Maybe there wouldn't even be that. It would be very much around a fairly singular communications proposition. But the concept would be it's a website and connection to other systems, to other parts of the organization, generally to user experience as a whole, would maybe not be in there, maybe be an afterthought. But I can't remember the last time I saw an RFP which didn't stress the need for the website to interconnect with other systems, whether those are CRM platforms, e-commerce platforms. So that kind of more holistic proposition is starting to become more universal. And with that comes some shifts in technology as well. So obviously headless is probably the key one, which has started to shift from a general aspirational technology standpoint to something which is more common as a starting point. We need to consider multiple channels, except we don't want to consider them as multiple channels. It's more of an omni-channel consideration, which means we have to have a connection point between them. We can't consider them as separate platforms, separate technologies.
So I love this evolution that you've articulated, that you've seen in RFPs over the years, from the website being this sort of standalone tool to the website as a keystone part of an entire marketing program. What do you think's next for the website? The
type of cycle that we tend to see in digital technology, and have seen since the very beginning, is a two-part cycle. First, you get a generation which creates new possibilities, new technologies, new ways of reaching people. And then you get a secondary wave of technology which makes that easier and more accessible to more people, more organizations, without requiring such a hefty technical investment. And I think we're seeing that kind of wave, secondary wave at the moment. Quite recently, we had the creation of headless as a concept. So over the last few years, we've seen the rise of headless CMSs. We've seen the rise of the concept of headless functionality, which provides specific functional endpoints that will fit into a different system, which is providing the content, providing the experience of that content. And now I think we're seeing the wave where there are systems coming in place that make all those concepts easier, and make it easier to realize in particular. So the hybrid CMSs, which will enable an approach which combines both the multi-channel effectiveness that headless can bring to it, but also the kind of control associated with the traditional CMS over content layout, etc. Tools that really help with some concepts that were more esoteric in the early days of headless, like isomorphic rendering, to make sure that accessibility, non-JavaScript requirements, etc. are met easily. And those are being built into the tools rather than needing specialist approaches. So we're kind of due another wave of new capabilities happening. I think that's going to build on what's just been made easier. And it's going to really tend towards content and experience as a unifying journey and a unified experience for end users. So instead of your live chat channel, your call center channel, your general website content, your offline content, etc., all being separate experiences which you're putting back-end effort into trying to make sure are consistent, and there's the ability to join those journeys up, that will start to become more seamless, because we'll be seeing technologies that really just enable those to be created.
Not quite new anymore, but what were your impressions of that update of WordPress, pros and cons?
So the obvious pro is the increased flexibility in page layout. Not that there weren't good page builders out for version 4, but there's increased complexity in the setup. It means that you're limiting yourself potentially a bit more in terms of theme availability. And just being integrated into the core platform just increases the extent to which you can rely on that kind of functionality. Obviously, the key con with it was the accessibility issues. I think that the way that those issues have been gradually being dealt with, and hundreds have been fixed now, is actually a testament to the community approach of WordPress, because it's effectively the community response to that which has ensured that that's been dealt with both from a front-end perspective and progressively on the editor side as well.
John, one of the questions we love asking guests is a book that you'd like to recommend to our viewers.
So the book I'm reading at the moment, and I'm not sure it would necessarily be a general recommendation, except for people who really like postmodern literature or Irish literature, but it's the collected letters of Flann O'Brien, which came out last year. Flann O'Brien was a fascinating character, quite troubled. But in addition to being one of the major figures in Irish novels, he was also a very senior civil servant in the Irish state, and one of the preeminent newspaper columnists in Ireland, and lots of writings that actually people aren't quite sure about, because he had a habit of picking arguments with himself in letter columns of newspapers, and he might be using different pen names, writing a letter, then writing another letter disagreeing with the first letter, writing a third letter which disagreed with his activities as a civil servant, or which disagreed with one of his newspaper columns. And nobody's really been able to quite piece together all the works that he did, because he was so various and generating so many different voices. I think one of the interesting things about that is just that reminder of, when you're thinking about the concept of a user, no user is a single person, represents a single persona. People are different personas at different points in their life, and at depending on their current role, whether it's their professional role, they might have multiple professional roles depending on the flexibility of their organisation. As a consumer, they will have different needs and different reactions depending on what kind of thing they're dealing with. And it's not generally going to be quite to the extent of writing into a newspaper to disagree with the letter that you wrote to the newspaper yesterday. But if you're not at the point where you're considering how users are going to react to what you're doing, considering that they have multiple aspects in their opinions, in their needs, and in how they're going to react to things, then you're oversimplifying your user and you're oversimplifying how you're going to interact with them.
John, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
That was John Pryor, the Solutions Director at Twentysix.